This is an audio version of Recommendations for EU Policymakers. The EU can play an important role in advancing participation of persons with disabilities in cultural life and enhancing cultural diversity by using its portfolio of competences and by shaping a disability-inclusive cultural policy. The following recommendations aim to support the EU institutions and bodies in advancing the right to cultural participation for persons with disabilities through legislation, funding, coordination, monitoring, and all available means. These recommendations stem from the research carried out in the Dancing Project and build on the analysis of the overall EU's role in the protection of disability rights. Recommendations for the European Commission. The Commission should advance EU disability policy and prioritise cultural participation of persons with disabilities, ensure a disability-inclusive EU cultural policy, put forward new legislation and other initiatives to foster the right of persons with disabilities to participate in cultural life, foster collaboration with Member States, ensure adequate monitoring of Member States' actions, ensure that EU funding enhances cultural participation of persons with disabilities, collect data on participation of persons with disabilities in the CCS, and lead by example. Recommendations for the European Parliament. The European Parliament should advocate for a progressive disability-inclusive approach in the annual EU budget, guaranteeing that sufficient resources are allocated to enhance access and participation in the CCS. Collaborate with OPDs and cultural stakeholders to ensure co-design of inclusive policies. Enhance exchange between Parliament committees dealing with matters that are relevant to the enjoyment by people with disabilities of the right to participate in cultural life, particularly but not exclusively the committees on culture and education and employment and social affairs. Leverage on the disability intergroup to promote the right of persons with disabilities to participate in cultural life. Request regular reporting from the European Commission on the implementation of accessibility and inclusion measures in EU-funded CCS projects. Call for the evaluation of the extent to which major EU cultural initiatives foster participation of persons with disabilities in the CCS. Ensure that when commissioning studies on EU cultural programmes, the commissioned authors consider the rights of persons with disabilities and the obligations stemming from the CRPD. Promote awareness of the petition process as a democratic tool for advancing disability rights, including the right to participate in cultural life. Ensure the visibility of artists and cultural professionals with disabilities in the Disability Rights Week initiative, which serves as a platform for public discussion and dialogue, and bring renewed attention to the right of people with disabilities to participate in cultural life. Involve artists and cultural professionals with disabilities and inclusive art companies to showcase diversity in events and exhibitions organised at the European Parliament premises in Strasbourg and Brussels. Recommendations for the Council of the EU. The Council of the EU should ensure a stronger focus on cultural participation of persons with disabilities in the Education, Youth, Culture and Sport Council and mainstream disability rights in Council conclusions. Continue promoting cultural participation of persons with disabilities through conclusions such as the Conclusions on Improving and Fostering Access to Culture 2024 and prompt Member States to safeguard disability rights in the CCS. Call on the Commission and Member States to mainstream disability inclusion into existing and future initiatives in the CCS, including the tabled revision of the AVMSD, as well as in EU funding. Set strategic priorities for EU policy in the CCS, which are inclusive of people with disabilities and designed with them in mind. Recommendations for the EU External Action Service, EEAS. The EU External Action Service should promote, through EU delegations, a disability-inclusive and intersectional approach to cultural initiatives in third countries, in line with the Guidance Note Leaving No One Behind, Disability Inclusion in EU External Action. Advance, through EU delegations, cultural initiatives supporting artists and cultural professionals with disabilities through mainstream and targeted actions. Make sure that EU delegations systematically apply disability-sensitive budgeting to all cultural initiatives that they organise or support. Promote training for staff members of EU delegations on inclusive cultural practices and accessibility of culture for persons with disabilities. Ensure the systematic collection and reporting on the application of the disability policy marker to cultural initiatives by EU delegations. And support and include artists with disabilities in the recurrent exhibitions of contemporary art at the EEAS premises in Brussels. Recommendations for the EU Fundamental Rights Agency, FRA. The Fundamental Rights Agency should expand the research to better address the right of persons with disabilities to participate in cultural life, with a focus on addressing barriers to participation and good practices in member states, and to include more explicitly and consistently cultural participation of persons with disabilities in studies addressing Articles 21, non-discrimination, 22, cultural, religious and linguistic diversity, and 26, integration of persons with disabilities of the CFR. Support national human rights institutions and equality bodies in monitoring and reporting on the implementation of Article 30 CRPD through technical assistance and methodological tools. And include data on cultural participation of persons with disabilities in the EU Fundamental Rights Information System, EFRIS. Recommendations for the European Education and Culture Executive Agency, EACEA. The European Education and Culture Executive Agency should ensure that OPDs and artists with disabilities can have full access to information on calls for proposals, include clear requirements for the integration of accessibility and disability inclusion in project design and evaluation criteria across Creative Europe and relevant Erasmus Plus calls. Adopt specific reporting requirements on the participation of persons with disabilities in funded projects. Develop technical guidance for applicants on budgeting disability-related costs and designing inclusive cultural projects.